Hi, this is Agony Myers, and you are watching Agony Does Not Perform. It looks like today we're going to do something a little bit different than what I've done before, because I thought it would be interesting to do kind of like a review slash discussion of Netflix's You. So first of all, I find it interesting that a series about a relatable male stalker would come out so soon after the hashtag Me Too movement and incel movement. Even though Joe doesn't overtly sexually harass or rape the character Beck, the extent of the show still somewhat normalizes and lampshades Joe's predatory behavior, I would say. For those who aren't familiar with the term lampshading, it is a term used in media criticism to describe when writers include problematic or offensive content in their work and address it by simply calling attention to it and moving on, instead of effectively demonstrating what is wrong with the context or how we ought to react when people say or do these problematic things.
That's it. Confirmed. We now have the address of the top model house.
Okay, for the record, what you guys are doing is really creepy.
You know what? If it's creepy to use the internet, military satellites, and robot aircraft to find a house full of gorgeous young models so that I can drop in on them unexpectedly, then fine, I'm creepy.
Even though there's an implication that these things are wrong, when the issue is called out, not a lot of runtime or emotional investment of the characters is spent delving into why these things are wrong or showing audiences how to effectively respond when they encounter these kinds of actions in real life. The combination of these things all in one package is what I find interesting yet harmful about this show, because it seems to give a fair and even balance to Joe's monstrosity and his sweetness. Even though it is generally good to be fair and balanced to different sides of an equation, this isn't a good way to approach every situation, because I believe that when we address things like stalking, kidnapping, murdering, they should always be established as bad and irredeemable. Oftentimes, people who find ways to excuse certain things because some people might deserve what's coming to them, some actions aren't viewed as that bad when they do it out of love, or sometimes somebody is just hot and should be treated better. So I'm going to get into how You appeals to audiences' emotional responses to things, which can cause them to throw their sense of logic and morality out the window. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is Penn Badgely's / Joe's cuteness factor. Even though I prefer how Penn looked in Easy A and Stepfather, because he was a little bit more beefy and less of a bony twink, he is still relatively attractive. It's important to address his appearance in this video because it appears to subvert how audiences typically think a stalker should look. However, when we factor in just how shallow a lot of people are, all his attractiveness really does is make audiences relate to and sympathize with a conventionally attractive man, regardless of what he does. Obviously, filling American movies and TV shows with extremely attractive white people is a common Hollywoodism. As far as story goes, a less attractive guy would have had less of a shot at getting the girl, which makes casting someone like Penn Badgely, who is cute but can play a psycho, understandable. Plus, this all seems to forward the message and warning that looks can be and usually are deceiving. But most audiences don't seem to get that message because we still make decisions to follow our libidos even when we might know better, which can make us ignore some apparent red flags and walk right into our own doom. Even though the media can warn us all at once, its warnings can be hard to understand or easy to ignore when most of pop culture is telling us that physical appearance is all that really matters. So this makes Stranger Things' Millie Bobby Brown's declaration that Joe and you isn't creepy and just loves Beck more of a popular opinion than some might think, because Joe is a monster wrapped up in a pretty package with seemingly noble intentions behind his horrible actions. But imagine how sympathetic you would be with Joe if he looked like the stalker slash kidnapper from Otis. The point is, we've gotten so superficial and accustomed to male aggression to the point that it's easy for us to give attractive people free passes, especially when it is a man doing what we indirectly teach men to do. In addition to Joe's being an attractive, skinny, white, awkwardly cute book guy, his inner dialogues about how much he loves and cares for Beck in a sense shows audiences that he must have been raised well, but he obviously finds some loopholes because ironically Joe's dialogues involve how much he's kind of protective of Beck and how much he loves her, yet he obviously stalks her, violates her privacy, steals from her, kills people she loves, etc. And then what the show does to kind of make Joe's actions seem justifiable is, he kills Beck's boyfriend, who's just some hipster douchebag who's kind of taking her for granted and isn't really committed to her, and Beck's best friend, Peach, who is a closeted lesbian who's secretly obsessed with and is stalking her, and kind of tries to control her life the way that Joe does by manipulating her and getting rid of other exterior influences in Beck's life. So even though Joe's intentions behind his actions appear to be noble, his primary goal is to get Beck whether she wants him or not. So unlike Benji, Joe actually has romantic feelings for her and no sexual or romantic feelings for anyone else. But like Benji, Joe is pretty much only concerned about what he wants and is okay with lying to her to get what he wants, with little to no consideration about what Beck actually wants. Getting to Beck's best friend, Peach, even though Peach is controlling and manipulative with the intentions of getting a heterosexual woman who can't reciprocate her feelings toward her, Joe pretty much has to manipulate and control everything in Beck's life to make her think that he is the best thing in her life. So both are obsessed and infatuated with Beck to the extreme that they need to sway her in their directions by eliminating anything that'll get in their way. Which is why, Peach and Joe just kind of butt heads. Therefore, Joe's delusions that he's eliminating the bad people from Beck's life is true to the extent that these people are essentially bad and selfish, but Joe is worse than them because he's actually dangerous, in addition to doing the same things that Benji and Peach have done to Beck. Mere details like Joe being attractive and apparently looking out for Beck's best interests is what tricks audiences into thinking that what Joe does isn't that bad, even when it is compared to manipulative and controlling things that regular people do with being psychopaths. I mean, yes, these behaviors may be toxic and detrimental, but they aren't outright destructive and violent. And when these behaviors are coupled with violence, it becomes worse. I mean, I'm just saying that just because it's like, people like Benji and Peach are normal. I mean, we encounter them all the time. Yes, it's bad and toxic. However, I mean, they're not as bad as like murderers or stalkers or kidnappers or anything like that. I just feel like that sort of needs to be made apparent. The last thing I'm going to get into here is, something that is probably the most common and misleading thing that we ever see in pop culture. And so I'm going to talk about Joe's infatuation and obsession with Beck getting conflated with true love. We live in a densely emotional and love-obsessed culture that believes that love at first sight is a real thing, and we tend to expect romantic connections to happen in almost everything we watch, regardless of the genre. So it is no surprise that things like stalking and abduction in media are often framed as acts of attraction that victims should see as flattering and romantic, which justifies any dangerous or creepy behaviors that stalkers or abductors in these stories exhibit. The romance in You is clearly just an intense infatuation, not love at first sight, which turns into an obsession that leads to stalking, kidnapping, and murder. However, Hollywood has conditioned us to spot out love over anything else and find it okay for people to do whatever they want as long as it's out of love. This reminds me of when I graded papers about Robert Browning's poem, Porphyria's Lover, which is from the perspective of a man describing his lust of some woman he's stalking, then strangles her with her own hair. What I found particularly disturbing about my students' responses to this poem is the fact that they either ignored or downplayed the fact that the narrator killed the woman he apparently loved just so they can focus on how much he loved her. I mean, first, what the narrator described as outright infatuation or puppy love, which happens immediately when you encounter someone you find physically and sometimes intellectually attractive, like when you first meet a hot person who is also interested in one of your favorite bands, books, movies, etc. It can't be the same as actual love because your impression of that person is very limited and biased. So you tend to overlook things about the person you might not like and amplify the qualities that you do like. If you wind up getting to know the person better, that infatuation might turn into something more substantial because you understand that person's ins and outs, but you also might eventually lose sexual or romantic interest if you find out more things that you don't like about the person and the flame just sort of burns out. The problem with Hollywood is that it almost always completely conflates infatuation with true love, which makes predatory and manipulative gestures that people do look like romantic ones. Which explains why it was so easy for my students to zone in on Browning's narrator's infatuation with Porphyria and excuse his violence. The second thing that disturbed me about my students' response to this poem was the more likely we are to overlook violence to celebrate what we think is romance, the more likely we would be to interpret potentially predatory behaviors as romance, which could cloud our judgment about the people who pursue us and what we think is acceptable about romantically or sexually pursuing others. For example, it gives men the okay to stalk and not take women's no's for answers, and pressures women into accepting a guy's advances even when she isn't interested. So if a woman turns a guy down after he has made some big, seemingly romantic gesture for her, she looks like a bitch, which makes the gesture more manipulative than truly romantic. It also reinforces the myth that women don't really know what they want and that they like to be chased, which, I mean, is sometimes the case, but yeah, I mean, if a man literally has to chase a woman, then we should all know that it's probably bad. We shouldn't encourage that. When we start thinking of ways to justify or sugarcoat somebody's violence in a TV show, it starts becoming easier to justify other people's physical, emotional, or psychological abuse in real life, which lets people get away with their horrid actions because we start buying into the bullshit that certain ends justify the means. It makes us start excusing vicious serial killers who are on trial and sympathizing with the spouses who use and beat us, although it's good to be understanding and empathetic, there still needs to be clear lines between good and bad, or in this case, unjustifiably bad and misunderstood. It also furthers our belief that attractive people deserve free passes to do whatever they want, and encourages men to be as aggressive as they want towards a girl who might not want them, and downplays dangerous acts of obsession as acts of attraction and love. More than Joe's obsession with Beck or being hung up on his ex, Candace, Joe's primary love interest is control. He wanted to control everything about Beck's life and struggled with losing that control after killing her boyfriend and best friend and finding that Beck was getting involved with other things that weren't in his sight, such as her affair with her counselor. He needed to know everything about her life and be everything to her, which was understandably suffocating to Beck because he was still trying to control her life, even when he didn't need to stalk her anymore. This brings me to the myth that rape happens out of affection and mere sexual attraction when it's actually about control. Rapists act out of wanting to exert ultimate control over their victims, and facing that utter lack of control is what's most traumatizing and violating to victims. So buying into the assumption that everything that Joe does for Beck is out of pure love and something you kind of wish that others would do for you is like buying into the myth that getting raped is somehow flattery. This kind of message is dangerous because it allows people to think of potential red flags as something that's well-intentioned, which could lead to them getting hurt. My point for this video is not to make you guys hate or not watch media like you. I am definitely not somebody to tell you what to like and not like, especially when it comes to horror or suspense, because I'm a huge horror fan. I mean, look at me. What I am saying here is to know what to recognize as threatening and non-threatening by not letting the illusion of love and physical appearance sway your judgment about people, because real creeps come in all shapes, sizes, and shades. So, yeah, I mean, I'm saying all these negative things about you, but I actually, really like the show. What I like about you what I like about the show is the inclusion of male and female masturbation. I realize that this is a weird and small thing to focus on in this series, but considering how most people likely masturbate and not as many have intercourse in real life, media usually portrays the reverse. Try to compare the number of times that you have seen sex in movies and TV shows to the number of times that you see masturbation. Chances are that more people get laid in the TV and movie world than masturbate. And when they do masturbate, it's usually framed in a comedic or shameful way, with the implication that jerking off is only something that lonely losers do, when it's actually pretty common for those with an active libido. You, on the other hand, shows that even a woman with an active sex life masturbates, and there's nothing depraved or shameful about it, which I think should become more normalized. If we're going to move forward in society with sex positivity, I think that all sexualities and forms of sex, aside from anything actually harmful or dangerous, should be depicted as acceptable and normal. Okay, so we could get into what the fuck I'm wearing. So yeah, it's like, I mean, if you guys haven't seen, previous videos of Agony Does Not Perform, I like, taking a few minutes to go over my look and everything that I put together for the video, just to, give you a little bit of something extra and everything like that, since I was just kind of sitting here and talking at you and everything like that. Okay, so if you haven't seen my previous video, I made this glorious severed face mask, And so this overall thing is a reference to my favorite scene from Devil's Rejects, when some woman is left in a motel room and, you know, just kind of gets, you know, they put her husband's face on and she was already wearing her husband's big shirt. And, you know, she chased a maid out into the parking lot and eventually got hit by a truck. Yeah, it's like, I think, you know, after seeing how influenced Rob Zombie was of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and House of a Thousand Corpses, the movie that came before Devil's Rejects, I kind of started, you know, connecting the dots that I think this overall scene and look from Devil's Rejects is influenced by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. In that movie, there's a scene where Stretch, the final girl of that movie, sneaks into, you know, Leatherface's and his family's secret lair to just kind of see what's going on. And there's a point where Leatherface finds her, and, you know, after skinning her coworker and taking off his face, he finds Stretch hiding in a room, and he puts, you know, her coworker's face onto Stretch, as, you know, as like in a weird way to kind of, I guess, disguise her, since she's obviously not supposed to be there. And he also just kind of dances with her and has like a weird kind of sexual response to Stretch in this kind of gender ambiguous kind of look. You know, being a woman wearing a man's face, while Leatherface is usually a man wearing a woman's face with makeup and everything on it. That's why I kind of thought this whole look would be perfect for me, because it, you know, just plays with gender really well. It just kind of mixes and mashes, you know, these two things in a pretty horrific way. So, that was my video. You know, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe as usual. I mean, in the comments, like, let me know what you think, what you thought of You, if you've seen it. And yeah, it's like, and I mean, I'm just curious to see, like, okay, so do other people find, you know, are other people just kind of wooed by Penn Badgely's cuteness, that, you know, they kind of overlook how predatory and dangerous he is? Yeah, it's like, or, you know, do you agree with me? You know, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me, etc.? Yeah, let me know. So like, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back with another video soon. I've already thought of the idea and everything. All right, so bye.